By the 4th century BCE, Egypt was a civilization under duress. The Persian Empire had seized control of the region, installing administrators who disregarded sacred traditions and forcing the last native pharaoh into exile. When a 20-year-old Macedonian king arrived at the Egyptian border in 332 BCE, the Persian governor surrendered without a fight. Egyptian citizens received Alexander as a liberator, a leader who might finally end centuries of foreign oppression. Alexander secured this loyalty through a calculated psychological strategy. He traveled directly to Memphis, the ancient capital, and made lavish sacrifices to the sacred Apis bull. By honoring this local deity, he proved he would respect Egyptian religious life in a way the Persians never had. He then marched hundreds of miles across the western desert to consult the remote oracle of Siwa. While he kept the specifics of the conversation secret, the oracle's priests reportedly addressed him as the son of Amun-Zeus. These actions at Memphis and Siwa provided Alexander with the divine legitimacy he needed to rule. He had earned the trust of the priesthood and the population, allowing him to be crowned pharaoh without fighting a single battle. This new reign was abruptly cut short. Alexander died in Babylon in 323 BCE at just 32 years old, leaving his massive empire without a designated heir. In the chaos that followed, his senior generals turned on one another. Ptolemy, one of Alexander's most trusted childhood companions, acted with the most foresight, identifying Egypt's agricultural wealth and securing it as his own province. To cement his authority, Ptolemy orchestrated a massive propaganda coup. In 321 BCE, he intercepted the funeral procession carrying Alexander's body back to Macedon and diverted it to Egypt. By physically possessing the conqueror's remains, Ptolemy linked his own legitimacy to the fallen hero. After stabilizing his control for nearly 2 decades, Ptolemy officially declared himself pharaoh in 305 BCE. The resulting 300-year dynasty was the product of a masterful political seizure, built on the stolen prestige of the world's most famous conqueror. The Ptolemies maintained control through a dual-natured governance. To the Greek-speaking world, they appeared as Hellenistic monarchs. To the native Egyptians, they took on the traditional roles and rituals of the ancient pharaohs. The Ptolemies understood that the Egyptian priesthood maintained social order. To secure their support, the dynasty provided massive funding for traditional temples, like the one at Edfu, ensuring the kings were depicted making offerings to the gods in the traditional Egyptian style. They even introduced a new deity to unify their subjects. Serapis was a hybrid god, blending attributes of the Egyptian Osiris and the sacred Apis bull with Greek gods like Zeus and Hades, creating a shared focus for a divided population. Alexandria became the laboratory for this synthesis. The Ptolemies established the Mausoleum and the Great Library, gathering scholars from across the Mediterranean and collecting hundreds of thousands of scrolls to create a global center of research. This dual society required a complex administrative system. To ensure their decrees were understood by everyone, royal orders, like the one found on the Rosetta Stone, were carved in hieroglyphics, Demotic script, and Greek. By combining cultural fusion with intellectual patronage, the Ptolemies maintained power for nearly 3 centuries, using these tools of soft power to control a territory that military force alone could not have held. By 51 BCE, the dynasty was crumbling. Egypt had become a client state of Rome, its rulers heavily indebted to Roman politicians and dependent on foreign military support to remain on the throne. Cleopatra VII was a political strategist and an intellectual powerhouse. She was the first member of her dynasty in 275 years to learn the native Egyptian language, part of a broader linguistic mastery that allowed her to communicate directly with her diverse subjects. Driven from her own capital by her brother's advisors in 48 BCE, she orchestrated a high-stakes meeting with Julius Caesar. She successfully formed a political alliance with the Roman leader, securing his support to win the Alexandrian War and reclaim her throne. Years later, she formed a strategic partnership with the Roman general Mark Antony. The alliance was built on mutual necessity. Cleopatra required Roman military muscle to deter invasion, while Antony needed Egypt's grain and gold to fund his campaigns. Cleopatra used her wealth and intellect to maneuver through Rome's own internal civil wars. For years, she successfully exploited Roman power struggles to shield Egypt from formal annexation. The balance finally tipped in 32 BCE. Antony's rival, Octavian, used the pair's close ties as propaganda, portraying Antony as a man who had abandoned Roman values for an Egyptian queen. Octavian used this sentiment to declare war directly on Cleopatra. In 31 BCE, Antony and Cleopatra met Octavian's fleet at the Battle of Actium. They suffered a catastrophic naval defeat, forcing a retreat to Alexandria. As Octavian's armies surrounded the capital in 30 BCE, Mark Antony took his own life. Cleopatra, realizing she would be paraded through Rome as a captive, committed suicide shortly after. Octavian consolidated his victory by ordering the execution of Cleopatra's son, Caesarion, effectively extinguishing the Ptolemaic bloodline. Cleopatra's death signaled the end of the Ptolemaic line and the final transition of Egypt into a Roman province. 3,000 years of independent Pharaonic civilization was brought to a close. The intellectual work of Ptolemaic Alexandria survived the fall of the dynasty. Scholars at the Mausoleum developed the early scientific method and calculated the Earth's circumference, while others translated the Hebrew scriptures into Greek to create the Septuagint, the version of the Old Testament that would scrap through the early Christian world. The blending of these two cultures also left behind the Fayum mummy portraits. These lifelike images used Greek painting techniques to honor Egyptian burial traditions, providing us with vivid, individual faces from 2 millennia ago. The Ptolemaic era bridged two civilizations, integrating thousands of years of Egyptian scholarship into the Greek intellectual traditions that would shape Western and Islamic thought for centuries to come.